How do you get better at meditation? Well, most people have the same experience that I did when I started, which is that you start doing focus meditations, but you feel like your mind flies away all the time and you're just not good at holding your mind solid. You may know and trust that over time you'll get better at this, but still it feels like a failure every time you're not able to hold your mind solid on one specific object. Well, one of the main goals of meditation is called mindfulness. And in mindfulness, this is not a failure at all. Mindfulness is just the idea of being full of the experience of mind. So as you're trying to hold the mind focused, you are full of that experience. And when the mind flies away, you're noticing that and seeing the patterns of your mind as you bring it back and hold the focus again. You're also developing your agency over the fact that the mind wants to fly away. But just the fact that you're noticing that the mind flies away and how it feels and what that experience is like is useful. So all of that is positive steps forward. What I would say if you feel that way is just stop feeling like you should be able to hold your mind solid. Know that you want to develop the agency to hold your mind solid and work towards bringing it back and replacing your focus on that specific object as quickly as you can and sustaining it for a long time. But there is no failure in seeing it fly away. You're simply becoming mindful. And the end result of that mindfulness is when you step out into your daily life and you're actively doing something. And when you notice your mind flying away, you now have practiced that and you see it more often. On the other hand, I know that some people begin meditating and they immediately feel like they're really good at it and they can just hold their mind solid and it never goes away and they feel great about it. I only know one person that's been like this, but I've heard stories of others, and the one person I know matches the experiences that I've heard of people who feel like they're really good at focusing their attention. When they continue meditating, what they eventually learn is that they just don't notice when their mind flies away. And as they become aware of it, they all of a sudden feel like they're taking steps backwards because now they're not good at holding their focus anymore. Their mind is flying away all the time. But that's also a positive step forward. It's literally someone who wasn't able to be full of the experience of mind, and now they're able to see those habits of mind, and eventually they'll take control of them. I'd like to be careful when I say take control of those habits of mind. I don't want to shut down the habits of mind completely, and I certainly don't want to quiet my mind completely ever. These are useful things that have developed in our biology over our course of life. When we were young babies in the crib, we began to notice that we were the object of other people's attention, and as we gained language, we begin to inquire and see what types of thoughts people think about us, and that develops our own internal thought life. Truly, this is incredibly useful, and it's what separates us from the animals. The problem is when that thought life gains control over everything and we're not able to take agency over it. Now, as I've noted, most people have the same experience I did, where you feel like you're not great at holding your focus, you feel it fly away, and eventually over time you gain agency over that. But the entire experience of seeing the mind fly away and bringing it back is all positive steps. And then there are some people who feel like they're really good at it, but generally as they continue meditating, they realize they just don't pay attention to their mind well enough. And as they learn to pay attention to their mind, they see that they're just not as good as they thought they were. And I really mean not as good as they thought they were. All of these are positive steps towards getting better. It does introduce the possibility that maybe there are some people who just have a natural ability to focus their mind on things. And that's wonderful. I still think there's a lot for those people to gain in meditation. But if they already have that solid agency over their focus, maybe they already have it. So now that we see holding the mind focused on one object, seeing the habits of mind as they fly away and bringing them back as all positive steps in the path of meditation, then as we get better at meditation, where does that path go? Well, it's an interesting question. It definitely depends on who you ask. If you ask Western practitioners, they talk about meditation as a practice. And as a meditator, I meditate every day. That's part of what I do, and that's what makes me a meditator. But if you ask people from the East about what is meditation, they'll give you a totally different story. I'm obviously generalizing here. I'm talking about two people from my teacher meditation. One, a Western guy who became a Burmese monk for a time, Greg Burdulis, who's wonderful, and he has this Western mindset that I share. But we had another teacher, Punuwasu Singh, who is also a wonderful guy, who's an Eastern meditator, and I would use him as representative of those schools of thought. The way he speaks about meditation is not as a practice that we do every day. It's rather something that happens to us when we do these practices of holding our focus. What he's talking about is the moment that in yoga we call samadhi. It could be the moment of enlightenment, the moment of union with the Holy Spirit, the moment of Zen or Nirvana. There are so many different names for this experience, and that's the moment when you truly enter meditation. So certainly not to everybody, but to some people this is the end result to strive for. I would say even if that's not the end result that you have to strive for, there's a lot that you can gain from meditation and all kinds of different practices. However, if you continue with a meditative practice, this is one common end that occurs for most meditators after they develop a daily practice for a long period of time. For me, myself, it really did feel like that samadhi moment. It's like when my sense of self dissolves completely, I had entered into this space of existing with all of creation at the same time. This sounds very esoteric and strange, but I'll tell you there are a lot of thinkers who have thought about and agree with this. Schrödinger famously believed in one universal consciousness. Eastern meditators will often say things that Christians are very uncomfortable with, like such that I am God, and so is the floor, and so is my dog, and my son, and my wife, and all of this creation is God. It's because they've had this experience of the self melting away, and as the ego ceases to exist, but I still exist, but I don't have this ego, I all of a sudden become a part of the holistic creation, or at least it feels that way. And I'll tell you, that is the way it felt to me. Another Christian meditator who says similar types of things that might make some people uncomfortable, but that I truly love, is Saint Catherine of Genoa, who lived in the 15th century. She was a meditator and prayer warrior, a Christian contemplative in the Catholic Church. And she had this wonderful quote where she says, "My only me is God." It's a quote representing the fact that when our sense of self dissolves completely, the Holy Spirit dwells within us. And so we become part of the experience of godliness. Truly, we experience union with the Holy Spirit in that moment. Not everybody has the same experience or description of this. Sam Harris, the famous best-selling author, neuroscientist, and philosopher, describes it simply as the realization that the self simply doesn't exist. And he has a very good way to describe what he means by it. It feels very logical, and I can follow what he says. And I think he's describing the exact same thing, but it just doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like when the sense dissolves and doesn't exist, all that's left is the connection with the Holy Spirit and all of creation together. If this is interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And whether you're interested in this path specifically or other paths with which you can gain other types of usefulness, I've got a video coming up that'll tell you all kinds of different meditations and what types of benefits you might gain from them. This is the Stoic Yogi, out.